Good morning, guys. Sorry, starting a little early just because of for the sake of time. I know Anna's always asking us to make sure we're on stage, so do it this way. So where I'm at this morning, been reading this book here. Steve let me borrow called "The Beauty of the In-Between," Matthew Nelson, and just a little bit of the beginning of the book. This is basically walking through the life of King David. So it's talking about his three phases of life being the pasture, the cave, and the palace, right? So as the book goes through, it's kind of just going through what each phase of life was for him and how God had trained him through it. Specifically, though, I'm just in the beginning of the book where it's talking about the pasture. And a lot of what he's talking about in this beginning is his process, right? The pasture is this place where God had him in process. It was a quiet place. It was a place of no status, of no reputation. It was a place where no one knew him, right? He was just a shepherd boy in a back pasture somewhere. So a lot of what he talks about is this process. So it struck me as an accord because I tend to be very objective and goal driven. Like I like having something to work towards. A lot of what he says, though, challenges that, and I'll get into that. As men, I think a lot of us that way too, though, right? Like we like objectives, we like goals, we like writing things down, like checking things off. I like reaching things, milestones, right? It gives us a sense of accomplishment, and which is a good thing. We can do this within fitness, right? Like I want a better physique, so I want to be this weight, this strength, lift this weight, climb this route, right? That kind of thing. If it's a career thing, right? If it's a relationship thing, maybe it's more money, which is fine, like accolades, status, more profit in your business if you're a small business owner, right? All of these things are good things. However, there are some potential pitfalls that can come with that, right? Goals can encourage pride. I never thought about it this way, but in a sense that can be true, right? If I'm chasing goals for the sake of puffing up my own ego, just to say, I've made these goals, I've hit these markers, I've made this much money. If I'm not careful, I can use that to puff up my pride in a bad way, right? So the negative side of following goals is that I have to now work harder to be humble. I have to watch the more things I accomplish and do, the more humble and humility I need to exercise just because of that process, right? Um, the other problem with goals is we all know this. Goals can be just task driven and just a checkbox, right? I did a thing just to do it, right? And that's the only reason. How many of us have started like the year Bible plan just to say we did it? But there's no heart in that, right? Sometimes we just do it just to, again, pat ourselves on the back or just to try to do it for the wrong reasons. Another thing that really spoke to me was reaching goals can also bring a temporary reward, but it leaves you wanting more. It's funny how you reach that goal and then all of a sudden, like it lasts for just a little bit. And then there's this hollow, I need another one. I need another one. I need another one, right? And it never ends. It's this never ending cycle of this rat race of achieving another goal for the sake of having goals, right? Again, goals are helpful. I'm not really dogging on them, but if we're not careful, our goals become our idols too, right? The other part of this too is our goals often don't even line up with God's goals. So spinning this into the whole process idea, the author talks about the Israelites in the desert. The Israelites in the desert was their process. They were getting prepared and ready to enter into the promised land, and God was expecting them to be there at a certain time. However, if you read the story, you know what happens. They fail that test miserably. They spend more time in the desert than one was needed because their hearts, because they were grumbling, because their attitudes are terrible. And because of that mistake in that process, their process, instead of taking what would have been, I think, 7 years, took 40. God said that because of their hearts and their evil, God would make sure that that generation that was supposed to go in the promised land would not enter it. So only because in their hearts they decided to not respond to God in faith and trust in that process, right? They wandered in that desert for a long time. And so they should have listened and done certain things, right? And for all of us, this is where the truth comes in. Process is where a lot of things can happen. Discipline, healing, growth, learning, discipling, leadership development, character development, testing, faith. If we try to shortcut process and we try to find quicker ways through what God's doing, we'll miss a lot of this that God wants to do, right? Just for the sake of reaching a goal, when perhaps the goal that God wants you to attain to is within the process itself, right? We think it's reaching something when God's like, I wanted you to learn something as you were reaching. That was really the goal, your heart to change, right? But we miss that. But I get why we don't like it, right? We hate process because it's not linear. It's never according to our plans. It's never the goal itself, right? We always feel like the process is in our way, right? If we would just get through process, I could get to my thing. It's always usually our attitude, right? It takes too long, usually, right? And then we don't see results. You know, if you've done any level of fitness, I'm sure Coach Brandon's noticed this, you hate doing workouts and you hate exercising because you don't see results in 1 to 3 to 6 months, whatever it is, right? When I started mountain biking, the first 2 years were literally just sucking air as I was riding my bike. And it felt like the worst thing. But every time I finished, I always loved the feeling afterwards, right? So it taught me a little bit about process in the sense of that kind of suffering produced something long term. And that was really the reward, right? Not the goal of just riding a trail or whatever it might be. So I wanted to read this excerpt real quick out of this book. In fact, when we feel like we're stuck in the giant, never-ending process, we might even think that we've missed it along the way. We should have gone left when we went right, but now we're being forced to endure the wilderness. So now we're in a big holding tank, the place where all forward motion has been halted and waiting commences. If we've lived very long, it's inevitable we'll arrive at a place where our expectations and our reality are on different planets. It's in these moments, though, that our faith is challenged. We're tempted to give up, let go of our dreams, abandon our call, revert to doubting, assume that if it hasn't happened, then it won't happen. Learning to embrace God's processes, his bigger plan for our life, will require us to take a huge step of faith. The waiting will require us to muster everything we know to be true about who God is. So take a minute and think about what happens in the process. It's usually in those despised seasons of obscurity that the most inward transformation takes place. It's the place where trust is formulated, characters are refined, perseverance is tested, and motives are evaluated. Ending here, when we become addicted to the destination, we usually end up despising the process. So maybe, just maybe, if we learn to fully embrace what God is trying to do in the process, we could actually shorten our season in the wilderness. So whatever process you may find yourself in, don't keep the goal and the idol of finishing the thing that you want the most. The thing that we should desire as men is our hearts be changed. The thing that we should desire is to be more Christ-like. That will happen in the process. Will we eventually hit a goal if we do the process? We will. But we should focus on the day-to-day, the mundane, the reading your scriptures, the praying for your brothers and sisters, praying for your spouse, loving people. That's process, that's sanctification. It's not fun all the time. It's, again, not linear. You won't always see fruit and results. That's not the point. The point is just to trust God through that, to have faith in it, and just trust him with the rest. So, that's it.